Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good day, everybody, depending on where you're watching from. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. You're all welcome once again to today's live broadcast, the Africa Enlightenment Center. And today we're continuing our 60-day Bible challenge. And we're going to be looking at the story. We looked at Cain and Abel. Today, we're looking at the story of Cain. We're told that Cain got married to a woman when he fled from the presence of God and all that. And who was Cain's father in law? He went to a different land called the land of Nod. And then we are told he got married and gave birth to Enoch. So, who was Cain's father in law? All right. So quickly, we are going to look at the Bible, all right? And that story is found in Genesis chapter 4. If you read your Bible, Genesis chapter 4, that's what we even read yesterday. The story of Cain and Abel is a continuation. Before I continue, this is the Africa Enlightenment Center. We are bringing you political, religious, and social enlightenment. Why are we doing this? So that people can get correct information, correct knowledge that they can use to live better lives because everybody wants the world to be a better place. And one way we can make the world a better place is when we have good information, good knowledge that can transform the hearts and minds of people and make them better people. For many years, there have been so much misinformation, especially when it comes to religion, that we need to correct, whether it has to do with Islam, whether it has to do with Christianity, whether it had to do with Africa traditional religion, whether it had to do with any other religion as far as humanity is concerned. So we have to look at these things. We have to review these things, or else we remain stagnant and we fall for the same error of the past. So it is important that we begin to look at these things and reveal the true situation of things and help people to think logically, help people to use their common sense, to understand the world and look at the world and understand the world and be able to do better because we can actually do better than we're doing. If we can tackle the problem of religion, especially religious extremism, then we'll be able to, have a better world. The truth remains that religion influences a lot of things. Politics is influenced majorly by religion. Remember, the conquest of those days was influenced by religion. Even in the Bible, the conquest of the Jews was influenced by religion. They were told that is their God, was their God that was telling them to go and conquer other lands, take over other people's lands, and all that. The same thing with Islam. We're told that it is their God that tells them to go and conquer some lands, what to do, call some people infidels and all that, non-believers, unbelievers, they call them infidels and all that. So religion dictates what, how the world is going. A lot of people are oblivious to this fact that it is religion that dictates how the world is actually moving to a very great extent. Science has done a lot, but until people begin to come out of religion and understand that this world, this natural world, is our responsibility, and we have to live in this world with common sense and reason and logic and not some superstitions that were created by people who are no longer alive, people who lived you know thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago, who are no longer alive. These people, they don't know what we know today. They never knew all of the things we know today. They didn't have the technology we have today. They didn't have the knowledge we have today. So they wrote down some of these stories based on their own assumptions, and superstition. And today we can't believe these kind of things, hook, line, and sinker, and use them to live our lives or use them to relate with other people. We have to relate with people by the knowledge of the knowledge we have about these people, all right, in the present, and not what some people said. A particular god said, a tribal god, for that matter. For instance, the Bible God is a tribal god. The God of Islam is a tribal god, originated from Riyadh of Saudi Arabia and all that. the Bible God originated from the land of Israel, okay, among the Hebrew people, and then they became Jews and Gentiles. So the Jews, even Yahweh originated from the Jewish people when they became Jews. So Judaism, the God of Judaism, is the same God that the Romans tinkered with and changed to Jesus Christ. You see that? So it's a whole lot of things. And we are doing what we are trying to understand from the very beginning how these stories link up and how they created these stories and put them together and used them to colonize people. All right. So that is what we are looking at. And today we're looking at the story of Cain, that we're told that Cain got married. But who did Cain marry? All right. So looking at the Bible, in verse 13 of Genesis chapter 4, and Cain said to Jehovah, my punishment is too great to be borne. Behold, thou hast driven me this day from the face of the ground, and from thy face shall I be hid, and I shall be a wanderer and fugitive on the earth. And it will come to pass that everyone who finds me will slay me. And Jehovah said to him, therefore, whoever slayeth Cain, it shall be revenged sevenfold. And Jehovah set a mark on Cain, lest any finding him should smite, him. This is somebody writing and reporting like it's an event that happened. Somebody is writing and reporting it. Mavi, you're welcome to the live session. All right. So it's like somebody is reporting, this event and all that. And when you look at the report, we read further, he says, and Cain went out from the presence of Jehovah. So it was as if Jehovah, this God, was talking with him, came down, in physical form. I was talking with him and all that. That was how God was presented. At first, their God was presented. The people who were writing these stories were not there. They didn't know anything about that. So these stories were formulated. For instance, they didn't know who gave birth. Nobody in this world knows his or her first ancestors, those who were, who first started his or her own race. For instance, my own race, I don't know who started it, but I know from the point that I gained consciousness, my great grandfathers, the ones that we have evidence for, and all that. But these people, the same thing, every tribe in the world don't know their first ancestors. You see that? So up to the point that you gain knowledge or you became conscious, that is when you begin to, look at records that are before you, if at all there were some records, and then okay, so person lived before me and all that. You see that? Or else, most of the history of ancestors that you have around the world, no matter the tribe, they are made up. People were just given assumed names and then made up. So this whole story is a made up story. Looking at the story itself, you know that with common sense, you know that this story is made up. And then we are told Cain went out of the presence of Jehovah and dwelt in the land of Nod toward the east of Eden. Where are these lands? All right. Some of these stories were written to claim land, to lay claim to land. In those days, land was gold. You have to own particular land, and to own the land, you have to drive out the people that are there if you love the land so much. And these people were nomads. They were moving from one place to the other, rearing animals, or maybe into every kind of farming. Okay, not just animal rearing. They were also into crop, production. So they look for the most fertile lands, and to claim the land, they have to write some stories about it and all that. It's a normal thing even in the world. When somebody wants to claim a particular land, it begins to write a story about it, because he that writes your story owns you, owns your story, your history. Anybody that writes your story owns your history. See that? So these stories were written, so that they can lay claim to certain lands and certain places. These are things that, with common sense, you can understand. But if you throw away your common sense, you will take these stories hook, line, and sinker. You will take them literally as if they were the true position of things. Now, if you look at it, let's go back to the story. And then we are told that he went to the land of Nod toward the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. So now he said to the east of Eden. Where is Eden? For so many years, I was puzzled by this Eden thing. I read so many books, searched the internet for information and all that. And somebody said at a point, I saw someone that said, "Oh, he has found the place called Eden." And I read through his write up, followed his story, videos, and all that. And one said is in the area of Uzbekistan, or yes, or Kazakhstan, that area. And then another one said that Eden is in Africa, in Ethiopia, the area of Ethiopia, and all that. So after some time, after a lot of research, I discovered that there is no place like that called Eden. There is no place like that. There was no place like that. And the place that is being called Eden is that land where the Israelis occupied, the Jewish people, the land where they occupied. That is where they call Eden. All right. If you go to the book of Revelation, you will see where it is mentioned in that write up the book of Revelation. When you see all of these symbols, there's a lot of symbolism, that has to do with that land. So it was about the particular area where they had been able to conquer and occupy. So all those stories were about that area. All right. So when you look at the story here, it talks about the land of Nod. So Cain moved from Eden to Nod and all that. We are told, like I pointed out yesterday, that the angel of God, God put an angel there with a flaming sword, to guard the place, so is the angel still guarding the place, that the place cannot be discovered? If anybody tells you that they found the place, that was Eden, that person is lying, because that place never existed. These stories are myths and legends, that were created for a certain purpose. Okay, it's a purpose of land grabbing, and controlling people and all that. The Jewish people, they did that, and over the years, different tribes, do that to other tribes. I always mention it. The British did that to Africans. Not only the British that did that, other tribes, the Romans did that to the world. Okay. So now looking at this story, we are told that Cain married his wife. Who was Cain's wife? When did Cain marry? There's no story of how he got married or who the wife was and all that. We're just told that he just got married to his wife and then he gave birth to Enoch. You see that? So you can see that looking at the chronology, looking at the chronology of events, chronology of names and all that, you discover that women are not given any place. And that issue of women not given any place when it comes to religion, it is a tribal issue. Okay, it's not only limited to the Jewish people or to the Arabs. Okay, even in our own tribes, back here in Nigeria, even some of our tribes, women have no inheritance. It is the males, that have all the inheritance in the house. Okay, women are not counted and all that. So there is no God in all of this. It was tribal people, and these scriptures were written by men. They were written by males. You see that? They wrote them according to how they deemed fit, according to how they wanted society to be structured and all that. They wrote these stories to conquer people, to control their own people. And then those who took these stories after them used these stories to conquer other people. Just like these same stories were used to colonize the minds of Africans, that is still a major challenge that we are having today in Africa. So now, who was Cain's father-in-law? Who gave birth to Cain's wives? There's I think they they tried to tinker with this story in a way that if you look at this translation of the Bible, which is the Amplified Bible Classic Edition, they try to tinker with the story, and there is in bracket, he said the daughter of Adam and Eve. So that the person Cain married was his sister, the daughter of Adam and Eve and all that. Why weren't these daughters mentioned if there's any element of truth to that? Why weren't they mentioned? Why were their names not included? It was not until you after the story of Cain and you get to the story of okay after Enoch and Irad begat Joel, and then to Lamech, who had two wives. That was where the names, some names were added. Ada, and the name of the second was Zillah. All of these names were, formulated. If you go to the if you study the Jewish language, you study the Hebrew language, you try to find out the meanings of these names, you marvel what you find, that these names, most of these names were actually not names ascribed to people, but they are metaphorical. They are metaphorical names. All right. So this is just stories that were created by tribal people. See that? This story is not a true reflection of things. There was nobody like that that was Cain. That means all the generations, of the world right now came through Cain. All right. We're told that flood came. We're going to go to that story tomorrow, the story of Noah and the flood. Okay. We're going to go to that tomorrow. But today we're talking about the issue of Cain, who was his father in law, because there is nothing there in the story. Okay. That is to tell you that something is wrong somewhere. When you look at the story, if you are a good reader, if you are a good reader, when you read a story, all right, if the story is fiction, you'll be able to know that this story is fictional. Even fictional stories, modern fictional stories, they carry names, they use names and all that. Those of you read novels, except you didn't do literature or you don't like literature. If you read novels, you read fictional stories, they look so real. And if you don't know that it is fiction, you take it that it's real life story, or it's a true story. So these stories also like this, they are fictional, especially most tribal stories are fictional. There's a story that I have read about, of that we're told when we're young, of a tribe that their strongest man could uproot a palm tree and brush his teeth with a palm tree. Isn't that funny? Their strongest man, who was their giant, could uproot a palm tree and brush his teeth with a palm tree. I know you won't believe that, right? You wouldn't believe it because it's not in the Bible, all right? It's not in the Bible, especially Christians, they won't believe it because it's not in the Bible. So common sense will tell you that that is impossible for somebody to, uproot a palm tree and brush his teeth with it. That's a very funny story. But that's a story of, that is being told in some tribes, of those days. And people actually believe such stories, superhero stories all over the place. You can find them in almost every tribe. All right. And there was a reason why superhero stories were told. You see that? And one of the major reasons why superhero stories were told, it is to give the tribe, a particular tribe, like, an edge, a sense of pride, an edge over other tribes, to show their strength, how strong they are. And a lot of people don't know that in those days, literature was virtually used to communicate the strength of a people or the strength of a tribe and all that. So stories were formulated, stories were created to give, the tribe some level of relevance in the scheme of things. All right, because the politics of the primitive politics they played was played majorly with religion and all that. So it is important that you understand these things when you are reading these stories in the Bible. All right. So from the Bible, if you read the story, Cain had no father-in-law. We are just told that he got married to his wife and he gave birth to a child, and then he built, a city. He built his city, and from there, um, And he called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. So he called the city Enoch. Where is that city? Where is it today? Where is the evidence that such a city exists? You see that? And a lot of people don't know that these stories were written between the 6th and 7th century BCE. That's where these stories were written. All right. So these stories have actually passed from generation to generation to generation over the years, and they've lost, a lot of, some parts of the stories have been lost over the years, and they've been modified over and over and over to suit those who actually are rewriting them to suit the present time they were writing them. If you study the Bible carefully, you will see some modifications, that were done to certain places. For instance, names of places. There were modifications that were done to certain places. For instance, the story of Abraham, the story of Abraham, the issue of tithe and all that. If you read that story, Abraham's encounter with his brother Lot when he went to rescue his brother Lot with the king of Sodom and Gomorrah, kings of Sodom and Gomorrah and other kings. If you read that story, you will see that there were some modifications in the names of the cities to try to present a different imagery, to present an imagery that is not there in the first accounts that were written. We're going to go to that when we come to the story of Abraham, but we are still the story of Cain. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the story of Noah. So the essence of this is to open your mind so that you can begin to question these things, because if you do not question these things, you will not learn. Will learn by questioning things that are before us or things that are presented to us. When we question them, we begin to find answers to these things. And when we find the right answers, then we can be able to learn. All right. So there's no history that talks about the father-in-law of Cain. So I just told that Cain just, got married and all that. So who was his father-in-law? The place he ran to, who were the people that were occupying that city? So how old was Cain when, if at all, those who claim that it was the daughters of Adam that he got married to? How many children must have been born during that period? Because Cain and Abel were, according to the story, were the first children of Adam and Eve, the purported first man and woman. So after Cain and Abel were born during that period that they had that fracas, how many years did Cain and Abel live before other children were born, and how many people were born at that time? And they founded cities already that were already living in the land of Nod, and we are told that they were driven from the Garden of Eden. So where were they? So Cain moved from Eden. So were they still in Eden when the Bible said in chapter 3 that they've moved, they were chased out of the garden of Eden? Or the Eden was big and there was a garden inside the Eden and all that? So these are questions you need to ask. And when we start asking these questions, some Christians will come up and say, "Oh, you are a carnal person. You can't understand the things of the spirit." They forget that some of us, we were in this thing, and we got to depths that many of them can't even get to today. All right. So we are not novices when it comes to these stories, and when it comes to the Bible. That is why we can even question these things, because these were things we just believed for so many years, and we thought them, we preached them, we used them to teach, and we even made impact with it. See that? But today, we're looking at them and saying, no, something is wrong with it, because the world has moved beyond these archaic stories, these mundane stories, these stories. The world has moved beyond all these things. And for the sake of Africa, we're trying to help to see how people can come off these things and begin to, face reality. All right. And face reality and begin to learn how we can actually live with one another and help one another to achieve our dreams as Africans and as people, and not trying to please a deity that doesn't exist. All right. Primitive people wrote about this deity and all that, and wrote about the conditions to please this deity, the conditions to please this God, and all that. But they don't know that you're not actually trying to please any God. You're pleasing the people who wrote these stories, because they wrote them for a purpose, for conquest, to secure that land. They wrote stories around the land that they were living in. All right. They wrote stories around that land to secure that land. For instance, the Middle East that is causing a lot of problems, not just to Israel, not just to the world, not just to the countries around there, but to the whole world, is a major problem in the world, the crisis in the Middle East. And it's centered around these religious stories. The Jews believe that that land was given to them by God, that it was given to their father Abraham. And then the Muslims, wrote that this land also belongs to them, that the temple, Solomon, where Solomon built his temple, is theirs and all that. They are children of Abraham, because Abraham, that was where Abraham sacrificed and all that. So they lay claim to Abraham. Both of them lay claim to Abraham. So who are the true sons of Abraham, if actually Abraham existed? But from these stories, we know that Abraham didn't exist. These were stories that were created, for the sake of, having access to that land and laying claim to that land. You see that? So these stories, for instance, the place Nod and all that, some of these places that are mentioned in the Bible, some of them that you can actually see today, they didn't mention them immediately. They wrote those stories. The names that were added, some of these names that were added, like I mentioned, the case of Abraham, and when he went to rescue Lot and all that. There was no place like Jerusalem at that time. There was no Jerusalem, you know, the city of Salem and all that. Some of those names were not there. They were added, later. Stories were modified and they were added later. You get it? So you have to understand that these stories, they were created for the sake of conquest, for the sake of dragging land, for the sake of, protecting, land. If you look at the story from the time of Abraham, they said this land was given to Abraham by God. Where is that God today? In a world like this, people are still dragging, for the lands in the Middle East, that their gods gave it to them. You see that? So the issue of religion, see, one of the reasons why the issue of religion is a very big problem. See that? But we know that people migrated from one place to the other and settled in different lands and all that. You see that? And some lands, some people settled, other people came, overpowered them, took the lands from them, and began to, reign in that land and took it as their own land and all that. That was what happened. There's no God anywhere that gave any land to anybody. So this story of Cain and Abel and all that, they had to write it and trace it to Abraham, that this, the first man and the first woman, gave birth to so and so and so till it got to Abraham, who is their father. And then they couldn't continue the story very well. They couldn't link that they are the children of Abraham. How are you a son of Abraham and all that? Though we're going to come to that. But today we're looking at just Cain. Let me not digress too much. I'm just giving you some, tips of what to expect, as we go further. So the issue of Cain, that Cain, married somebody and all that. Who did he marry? With, one of the Bible translations claim that it was the daughter of Adam and Eve. Who was that daughter? Where did, when was that one born? And how did that one now migrate from there, the Eden, to the land of Nod? And we are told that Cain moved from Eden to Nod. All right. But as at the time before Cain was born, they've already been driven from the garden. So when they were driven from the garden, where were they living? All right. And who created the land of Nod, where Cain went to? Okay, where is the land of Nod? What is the evidence for the existence of the land of Nod? So all of these questions will help you to shake your mind and know that something is wrong with these stories, that we cannot, especially as Africans, we cannot, tie ourselves to these stories. This is not our ancestry. It has nothing to do with us. These stories have nothing to do with us. You see that? So we have to deconstruct these stories. Let people know that these stories have nothing to do with us. These stories have been used to conquer our mind, have been used to conquer our lands, and to steal our resources for thousands of years. They've been mining these resources, they've been stealing these resources and taking them in the name that their God is supreme. If you worship the God of a man, you are a slave to that person. The person has conquered you. You are under his direct, rulership. You see that? So Africans and other people that are worshiping the God of Abraham and all that, you are invariably worshiping those who created that God and those who created those stories. So you are subject to them. You see that? They can lay claim to whatever you have because they tell you that they are the ones that knew that God before you, that they are ahead of you, they are before you, and all that. They claim seniority. You see that there's a whole lot to this thing. There's so much to this thing. So it's important that people begin to learn to deconstruct and deconstruct these stories to understand that these stories have nothing to do with us. All right. So Cain, story of Cain is just a myth, like every other story, just a myth, the whole story. So there's no record, no evidences, and all that. That there were some people in a place called Nod that Cain went to and married their daughter and all that. Who was his father-in-law? There's no record and all that. Okay, so that there's no record of these things tells you that something is wrong. That the story is not factual. The story is just fictional. It's a fictional story. All right. So you go and read it yourself. It's in Genesis chapter 4. Okay? Go and read it yourself. Yesterday I was talking about the fact that we were told that Cain, his sacrifice was not accepted. We were told that Abel's sacrifice was accepted. Why? There is no tangible reason that was given why Cain's sacrifice were not accepted. We're only told that Cain did not do well and all that. So in the New Testament you used to talk about cheerful giver, so Cain did not give cheerfully. But if you look at it, you see the bias at that time, okay, for those who were animal rearers. See that? And it's still there in our society, especially in Nigeria. Okay, those who rear animals, for instance, the Fulani herdsmen, they believe that they should be given more priority than normal farmers, those who farm crops, so they can lead their cattle into any land because they believe every land belongs to them. So they can lead their cattle into any land and then graze any land because they believe their cattle are more superior to the crops that people are planting and all that. You see that? They place more value on the animals. Same way in those days, value was placed more on animals, than crops. They place more value. Those who own animals, they place more value on them than those who plant crops and all that, or other farmers or hunters. All right. That's where you look at the story of Isaac and Jacob. We're going to look at that also, okay, because it's 60 days. Today is just day 5. That's why you have to be glued to this, broadcast or podcast. All right. So, those of you watching on YouTube, please share this video, whether YouTube or Facebook. Share this video, like and comment, and you can support by sending us super thanks to encourage us. If you are watching live, you can send us super chats. Let's see your comments. Comment on the video. Tell us if you know the father-in-law of Cain. Come out and tell us the father-in-law of Cain. And if you want to challenge us, bring on the challenge. Let us discuss it live. I've left out some details, purposefully because we're going to use them, subsequently. So if you want to challenge me, come on live. I dare you to challenge me. Give me details, give us details, tell us. Don't just bring conjectures and just dismiss it, like dismiss what we're saying, like, oh, you don't believe because you don't know this, because you don't have the spirit of God and all that. Those cock and bull stories, that used to dismiss gullible people, it's over. This is the age of knowledge. This is the age of enlightenment, especially for Africa. This is the age of wisdom, knowledge, and deep understanding. So we can't just take any story, and just believe it. Hook, line, and sinker. We have to examine everything and find out whether it is true or not true, whether it is relevant or not relevant, for life and living and whatsoever. So I'm going to end the live here on YouTube. Please subscribe to the channel, Africa Enlightenment Center. Share our videos. There are so many videos for you to watch. Go back. Day one, day two, day three, day four is there. If you've not watched them, go and watch them. Thank you for joining in. See you tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about the story of Enoch. We're going to talk about Enoch. We're also going to talk about Noah, if time permits, or we take Noah to the next day.